So when Aaron and I first started Strong Women podcast, we got to interview Johnny Erickson Tata. Do you guys know that name? Okay, just a real quick, if you don't know that name. So Johnny is a quadriplegic. She's in her 70s, and when she was 17, she was an athletic teenager, just out having fun at the lake, and she dove in and broke her neck, and she's been a quadriplegic since she was 17. And Johnny is one of those people that is just, you know, you almost feel like Jesus might be standing right next to her. You know those kind of people where you're like, you really love Jesus. She's one of those people. But Aaron and I talked to her about her whole story and how she really grew in her faith. And then just a couple months ago, I got to talk to her again. And I mean, Johnny is like top of my list of strong women who walk faithfully with Christ. And so I just asked her, like, tell me about marriage. Tell me what you're learning about that. Tell me what you're learning about God. How about prayer? How about suffering? You know, I was just like, feed me. And so at one point she said that, okay, so if you've ever seen Johnny talk, her caretakers can put braces on her arms. She's in a wheelchair. They can put braces on her arms. So she often will kind of like talk like this. And she can kind of move her arms around, but not real controlled. Well, if her caretakers strap a spoon onto her brace, she can actually feed herself. It's like her one independent thing she can do. Well, this past year, she was in and out of the hospital with pneumonia for 45 days. And she was telling me about this. She said it was a really hard health year. And she had just enough strength in her shoulder to be able to feed herself. And she lost that during this sickness. And so the other part of this sickness is they sent her home with a nebulizer and maybe iron lungs. I could be totally wrong on what all they sent her home with. All I know is she had to strap it on, and it would shake so violently while the treatment was happening that she couldn't hear anybody. She was like, I couldn't even listen to audiobooks. And I'm like, oh, that's terrible. That is suffering right there. But so she was like, so I decided, I guess I should memorize scripture. So she's like, so I memorized Ephesians 1 and James. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. Good job. I feel convicted. Okay. But so she was saying all that. But then also, so back to the shoulder, losing that ability to feed herself. I said, Johnny, that is the one independent thing you had. And she goes, you are exactly right. That's the one independent thing I had. And I lost it. And my first inclination was to complain. Which I was like, that feels justified. You know, I didn't say that because she wasn't leading towards that in this story. So I'm like, oh, glad you didn't, you know. But she was like, my first inclination was to complain. But then I said, no, I'm not gonna complain about this. God has been faithful for 57 years while I've been a quadriplegic. I can trust him. I know he's been faithful. And so she said, as my little, small, tiny offering of obedience, I said, okay, I'm gonna trust you. And to show that, I'm going to bless the hands that have to feed me. Because she was like, now as a 70-something-year-old lady, I'm having to be fed. And it's embarrassing. But I've chosen to trust. And I bless the hands that feed me. In fact, she was saying just that day, a lady came to tour Johnny and Friends. A complete stranger, like she's just meeting this lady. And they have to have lunch together. So she blesses her hands. And she said, Sarah, that tiny little act of obedience, God has cracked open to a more muscular faith. But here's the thing about Johnny, like she didn't just decide. She has practiced trusting God all her life, and she knows that he is faithful. So when a thing like this happens, she can say, no, I know that he's faithful. I feel like it's a Puddle Glum moment. Do you guys know the story in The Silver Chair, the Narnia series, The Silver Chair? Jill and Eustace and Puddle Glum are on a search to find the prince. They find him in the underworld, and he is tied to a chair, and he's been enchanted by the queen of the underworld. Well, they have just released him because they figure out, oh, he's being enchanted. So they release him, and the queen of the underworld comes in just as they're about to escape. And she throws some sort of enchantment on the fire, and she starts to question everything that they believe about reality. Oh, there is no Narnia. Okay, and if you've ever listened to Focus on the Family's version, you know, there's no Narnia. There's no sun. There's no overworld. There's no Aslan. Now to bed. And then Puddleglum gets just enough courage. And this is what it says. With his bare foot, he stamped on the fire, because remember, that's where the enchantment was coming from, grinding a large part of it into ashes on the flat earth. And then he stands up bravely to the queen of the underworld, and he says, even if everything you say is true, I'm on Aslan's side, even if there is no Aslan. I'm gonna live as much like a Narnian as I can, even if there's no Narnia. And then the children are like, oh, hurrah, Puddleglum. Good old Puddleglum, actually. Oh, good old Puddleglum. But what he did was he got through that fog that had confused everyone, stamped on that enchanting fire, and he said, no, I know what is true. And that's what Johnny did. She stamped on that enchanting fire that was leading towards despair and distrust of the Lord that she had learned to love. And she knew he was trustworthy, so she was able to stamp on that fire and say, I trust in him.